Why is there a stranger drinking orange juice in my kitchen? That was the first thing I said when I walked downstairs and saw a man I'd never seen before. Barefoot, relaxed, sipping juice straight from my fridge. He didn't even flinch. My cousin Damon, who'd been crashing in my guest room for months, just shrugged. And then he said it. The sentence that made my blood run cold. "Oh, I rented out the basement. You weren't using it anyway." No call, no heads up, no permission. Just a smile. And my home becoming someone else's Airbnb. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I changed every single lock. My name is Monica Wells. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And for a while, I thought being too nice wasn't a crime, until someone made my kindness look like weakness. After my parents passed away, they left me this house. A simple 2-story home in the suburbs, nothing fancy. But it was ours. It had creaky floors, a backyard with overgrown weeds, and a finished basement my dad built himself. Every wall still whispered memories. I kept everything exactly the way they left it. And maybe that's why, when my cousin Damon asked to stay for just a few weeks, I didn't even hesitate. He had lost his job, said his girlfriend kicked him out, told me he just needed a place to get back on his feet. And I believed him, because we were family. Because I remembered when we were kids, sneaking Kool-Aid from the fridge and staying up watching cartoons. Because I wanted to be the person my parents raised me to be. So I let him stay. No rent, no deadline, no rules. At first, it was okay. Damon stayed in the guest room upstairs. He said thank you every day, cleaned up after himself, even cooked dinner a few times. But slowly, like water seeping through a crack, the shift began. Dishes started piling up. He'd leave music blasting when I was trying to sleep. Friends came over, loud ones I didn't know, ones who treated the house like it was theirs. And Damon, he stopped saying thank you. He stopped saying anything. He just existed, sprawled on my couch, using my things, eating my food, living in my space. But I didn't say anything, because that's what people like me do, right? We keep the peace. We smile through the discomfort. We tell ourselves, it's just temporary, until it's not. One night, I came home late from work. My feet were aching. I was exhausted. I just wanted to take a shower and crawl into bed. But as I reached the stairs, something felt off. There were voices. Coming from the basement? I hadn't been down there in weeks. The door was slightly open, and when I stepped closer, I heard laughter. Not Damon, not his voice. New voices, 2 of them. I opened the door and froze. There, sitting comfortably on a fold-out couch, was a young couple. A man and a woman. They were barefoot, eating takeout, watching TV, in my basement. The woman looked up and smiled. "Hi, you must be Monica." I blinked. I'm sorry, who are you? The man stood up, extended his hand like we were old friends. We just moved in. Damon said you were cool with subleasing. Said it's a private entrance downstairs so we wouldn't bother anyone. I couldn't speak. I turned, marched upstairs, and found Damon at the kitchen table, eating cereal like nothing happened. I slammed my hand on the table. "Who are the people in my basement?" He didn't even flinch, just shrugged, then said the sentence that burned into my brain. "Oh, I rented it out. You weren't using it anyway." Just like that. Like I was a side character in my own house. Like my name wasn't on the deed. Like I was the guest. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to throw him out that instant. But instead, I stood still, because something in me shifted. I looked around, at the sink full of dishes, at the couch covered in his mess, at the shoes by the door that weren't mine, and I realized this wasn't my home anymore. It was his playground. And that basement, that was the line he should have never crossed. So I said nothing. I just turned around and started planning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling like it held all the answers. But it didn't. Because the only answer I needed was already clear. He rented out my basement, without asking, without telling me, without even considering that this house, this space was mine. I thought about calling the police. I thought about marching down there and kicking those 2 renters out myself. But then what Damon would lie, twist it, say I agreed offhandedly, that I forgot the conversation, that it was a misunderstanding, And maybe, to someone who didn't know the history, that would sound believable. But not to me. I knew who I was dealing with. Damon had always been charming, always slick with words. The type of guy who could talk himself out of a parking ticket and into a free dinner. But charm is a mask, and when it slips, you see the monster underneath. So I made a decision. Not a loud one, not an impulsive one, but a quiet, powerful one. I went to the county clerk's office the next morning and printed every official document. I had the deed to the house, the title, the property lines, everything in my name. My parents left it to me alone. Damon's name was nowhere, not on a lease, not on a form, not even as a dependent. Then I called my friend Callie, she's a lawyer. I asked one question: can I evict someone who was never legally allowed to rent out my space? She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. And if he made money off it without your consent, that's fraud. That word echoed in my chest. Fraud? It sounded so official, so damning. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't just disrespect. It was theft of space, of power, of boundaries. So I got to work. I filed a formal complaint. Not against the renters downstairs, they were victims of Damon too, but against him. I attached bank screenshots showing Venmo payments titled Rent. Cross-referenced them with the dates the couple moved in. Documented every step. Then I called a locksmith. Not just to change the front door. I asked for every lock, every window latch, every access point to be changed, including the basement's private entrance. It took 4 hours. I watched every bolt replaced, every key recut. When the locksmith handed me the final set of keys, I held them like a sword. And I waited. That night, Damon didn't come home. Probably at some bar, running his mouth, pretending he owned what he never built. But the next morning, he showed up. I was sipping coffee by the window when I saw him. Pizza box in one hand, keys jangling in the other. He walked up like nothing had changed, and stopped. The key didn't fit. He tried again and again. Then he rang the bell. I didn't answer. He rang it again, harder. Then started knocking, loud. Finally, I opened the door a crack. He blinked, confused. What the hell, Monica? I stared at him, calm. You changed the locks. I nodded. Yes, I did. You can't just lock me out. He snapped. I live here. No, I said softly. You stayed here and you overstayed. His face twisted. What about my stuff? It's in storage. I'll send you the address. He looked like he was about to explode. You're insane, he hissed. You're overreacting. It was just the basement. You weren't using it. And there it was again, that sentence. That justification. That arrogant belief that what was mine could be his. I stepped closer. You used my house. You stole space I never offered. And you made money off my name. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You're lucky I didn't call the cops. Then I closed the door. He stood there, pounding and cursing until the neighbors peeked out. Then he left. And me, I sat back down, poured another cup of coffee, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the couple from the basement. Hi, Monica, the woman said nervously. We just wanted to say, we're so sorry. Damon didn't tell us the truth. We thought it was legit. I sighed. It's okay. You didn't know. She paused. We actually feel scammed. He kept our deposit. Won't answer our calls. Of course he did. I gave her the name of a small claims lawyer. Told her to file. Told her to mention my complaint too. Let the law do what it's made to do. And then I made my final move. I posted a warning in our local neighborhood group online. Do not rent from Damon Wells. He is not authorized to lease any part of 228 Gardenia Drive. This property is privately owned. He is not the owner. It spread fast. People shared it, tagged friends. One woman commented, OMG, I almost signed with him last week. I didn't smile. But inside, I felt something settle, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Damon never came back. He sent one text, something petty about karma, but I didn't reply, because silence, sometimes, is the loudest answer. And for the first time in weeks, my home felt like mine again. No strangers. No tension. Just hardwood floors, fresh locks. And peace. Real, earned peace. I thought I was done. I thought changing the locks, evicting Damon, and reclaiming my space would be the final chapter. But healing isn't a door you close. It's the silence that follows. And whether you can live with what echoes back. The week after Damon left was quiet. Almost too quiet. For the first time in months, I could hear my own thoughts. No music blaring from upstairs. No strangers in the basement. Just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards I'd grown up on. But beneath the peace was something else. Grief. Not for Damon, but for the version of me that let it go on for so long. I walked around the house like it was a museum of all the boundaries I'd failed to enforce. The couch he stained with takeout sauce, the guest towels he left damp and ruined, the pantry he emptied without ever once buying groceries. Each object whispered, "You let this happen," and they were right. I let it happen, because I didn't want to be the difficult one, the one who lays down rules, the one who says no. Because somewhere deep down, I thought saying no meant being cruel. But now I knew better. There is nothing cruel about protecting your peace. I started making a list. Not of chores, not of revenge, but of restoration. Step 1, I cleared out the basement. The couple had taken most of their things, but Damon's fingerprints were everywhere. Mismatched furniture, cheap wall art, a broken space heater. I filled garbage bags with the remnants and dropped them at the donation center without a second thought. Then I repainted the walls. Soft gray, clean, unclaimed. It felt like washing away fingerprints I never consented to. Step 2, I changed the layout upstairs. Moved the guest room bed to the other side of the wall. Replaced the comforter. Bought a new set of sheets with my favorite color emerald green. Little things, but each one was a declaration. This is mine. This space is mine. And no one gets to rewrite that again. On the third day of this quiet rebuild, I found something. It was tucked between the couch cushions, Damon's old spiral notebook. Normally I would have tossed it, but something told me to flip through, and what I saw made my stomach twist. Names, dates, amounts, a whole list of people Damon had planned to rent to. Notes about potential tenants, basement tour at 6 p.m., and even some mentions of a second-floor cozy short-term stay opportunity. He had plans to carve up my home, room by room, like it was his. I closed the notebook. And I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I scanned it, and I emailed it to Callie, my lawyer. Subject line, just in case. Because I knew now people like Damon don't just leave. They circle back. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, he did. Not physically, but legally. I came home one afternoon to a letter taped to my door. He was suing me for wrongful eviction. My hands trembled as I read the document. He claimed I had promised him long-term housing, that I had verbally agreed to let him sublease, that he'd invested in the basement remodel and was owed a portion of rental income. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny, because lies on paper can be dangerous, and that's when I stopped playing nice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I gathered every document, photos of the basement before and after, screenshots of payments from strangers to Damon's Venmo, the scanned notebook, even a voice memo I'd once recorded by accident, him bragging to his friend on the phone. Nah, she don't care, she's soft. I could rent out the whole top floor. She'd just blink. I handed it all to Callie. She looked at me and said, "Monica, we've got him." Court was scheduled a month later. The day I walked into that courtroom, I felt my palms sweat. I wore a navy suit my mom used to love, hair pulled back, shoulders high. Damon was already there, wearing sunglasses indoors like a celebrity. He looked at me once, smirked, but that smirk didn't last. Not when Callie presented the screenshots. Not when the judge read out the voice memo. Not when I handed over the deed. And definitely not when the couple from the basement showed up uninvited, unpaid, and testified on my behalf. We thought we were renting from Monica, the woman said. But Damon handled everything, and he told us not to bother the lady upstairs. I will never forget the judge's face. Disgust, disbelief. Then dismissal? The case was thrown out. Not only that Damon was fined for unauthorized subleasing, tax fraud, and ordered to pay restitution to the couple and me, he stormed out of that courtroom like a child denied a toy. And me? I just sat there, breathing, free. When I stepped outside, the sun hit my face differently. Warmer, truer. Because that wasn't just a legal win. It was a personal one. I wasn't soft. I was strong. I wasn't cruel. I was clear. And no one no one would ever make me feel small in my own home again. You'd think after winning in court, after watching Damon squirm under the weight of his own lies, I'd feel whole again. But revenge, even the silent kind, doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it just clears the rubble, and you're left staring at the crater of what used to be trust. I didn't just lose square footage to Damon. I lost pieces of myself. And when the adrenaline wore off, when the court dates stopped and the apologies came in, I found myself alone. Not lonely, just alone. In a house that finally belonged to me again, but one that felt bigger than before, quieter. Like the walls were waiting for me to decide who I wanted to be, now that no one else was writing the script. So I started small. I hosted a dinner. Just 4 people. My best friend Naomi, my neighbor Mrs. Harris, my coworker Jen and her wife, Alicia. I cooked everything from scratch. Set real napkins on the table, lit candles. It wasn't just a meal. It was a reclamation of joy, of space, of choosing who sits at my table. Naomi brought dessert, a caramel cake just like my mom used to make. And when she hugged me before leaving, she whispered something I hadn't realized I needed to hear. You've got your spark back. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the streetlights blink on. And for the first time in forever, I felt rooted. Not surviving. Living. But the universe, bless it, has a way of testing you right when you start to heal. A week after the dinner, I received a letter in the mail. From Damon. Typed, formal, cold. He was appealing the court decision, claiming new evidence. It was laughable, except it wasn't, because appeals mean more court. More time. More money. More dragging my piece back into the mud. I called Callie. She sighed. He's reaching. Desperate. But we'll handle it. I wanted to scream. To drive to wherever he was and tell him to his face. You lost. Let it go. But I didn't. Because that's what he wanted. For me to unravel. Instead, I did something else. Something he never expected. I sold the house. Yep, just like that. Listed it, staged it, found a buyer in 2 weeks. A young couple, newlyweds, expecting their first child. They loved the basement. Said it'd be a perfect playroom. I handed them the keys with a smile and walked away. Because here's the truth Damon never understood. The power was never in the house. It was in the choice, and I chose to begin again. I used the money to buy a small bungalow across town. 1 story, all mine. No memories clinging to the corners. Just fresh paint, a sunny porch, and windows that let in the morning light like a promise. I didn't tell Damon. Let him appeal air. Let him show up to a courtroom arguing about property that no longer had my name on it. Let him fight shadows, because I'd moved on. Literally, spiritually, legally. My new neighbors were kind, quiet. One brought over a pie on move-in day. I planted herbs by the window. Adopted a rescue cat named Peach. Started sleeping with the windows open. Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a breeze that doesn't have to ask permission. And yet, one evening, while sorting boxes in my new garage, I found something that stopped me cold. An old photograph. Me and Damon. We were kids, sitting on my parents' porch, faces smeared with popsicle, laughing. Before ego, before betrayal, before the basement became a battlefield. And for a second, just a second, I felt sorrow. Not for him, but for what never had a chance to stay pure. That photo went into a box labeled past. Not trash, not display, just acknowledgement. Because healing isn't pretending it didn't happen. It's choosing what gets to follow you. And what stays behind? Weeks passed. The court sent me a notice. Appeal denied. Case closed. Damon fined again for wasting judicial resources. I didn't dance. Didn't pop champagne. I just stood barefoot on my new hardwood floors and exhaled. Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the absence of noise, the space you finally fill with your own voice. I invited Naomi over again. She brought wine. We sat in my backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors too soft to name. And she asked, "Do you ever miss the old place?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said, "because this place, it was chosen. By me, for me, not inherited, not tolerated, not shared with anyone who didn't earn it." She smiled. And in that moment, under the open sky, I realized the basement wasn't the betrayal. It was the mirror. It showed me where I had disappeared in my own life and forced me to return, not with rage, but with boundaries. with clarity, with quiet power. The kind that doesn't kick doors down, it changes the locks. Peace isn't a firework. It doesn't explode across the sky. It doesn't come with applause or an audience. Peace is a whisper, and when you finally hear it, it's almost unnerving. Because for so long, I didn't know silence that wasn't rooted in fear. Silence used to mean being ignored, being walked over, being erased. But now, silence means control. My control. It's been 6 months since I left the old house. 6 months since I closed the chapter on Damon and opened one on myself. And life, in its quiet little ways, has been good. No dramatic plot twists. No battles. Just mornings with sunlight through clean windows. Fresh coffee? New beginnings. I started working part-time from home writing freelance articles, consulting on home renovation blogs. Turns out, surviving a family dispute and a legal mess gives you perspective people pay for. One of my articles even went viral. When the guest becomes the invader, a homeowner's guide to boundaries. Funny how something so painful can bloom into purpose. But growth isn't always loud either. Sometimes it shows up as stillness. The kind where you sit in your own home, hear nothing but a cat's purring, and smile because there's no one you have to accommodate. And yet, there was one thing left. One room in the new bungalow I hadn't touched. The guest room. It stayed closed. Empty. Uninviting. Not out of laziness. But fear? Fear that if I opened that space, I'd open myself to being used again. Taken for granted. Disrespected. But healing, real healing, isn't about staying closed. It's about learning to open with discernment. So one Saturday morning, I opened the door, and I started over new curtains, a twin bed cozy, not indulgent, bookshelves, a lamp, a small basket of essentials. Not for Damon, not for anyone like him, but for me to remind myself I can still be generous without being exploited. I can still make space without losing mine. That room is now called the quiet room. Naomi visits sometimes and reads in there. Peach naps by the window. Sometimes I sit in that room just to write or think, and it feels like forgiveness. Not for Damon, but for the girl I was, the girl who thought silence meant surrender. I've rewritten that definition, and I've written it in brick and paint and locked doors and guest towels. It's mine now. Last week, I got an email from Damon. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. The subject line said, "Apology if it matters," and inside were 6 short lines. No excuses, no defenses. Just this: I was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to say it. You were always more generous than I ever was. I hope you're well. I stared at those words, and I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel closure. I just felt nothing, because I had already let go. Not out of grace, but out of growth. And the thing about growth, it doesn't ask for validation, it just moves. So I archived the email, didn't reply. Didn't need to, because this right here was my answer. Every flower in the garden I planted, every clean dish in the sink, every time I walk barefoot across floors no one else stains, every time I breathe in and feel no weight, that's my reply. That's my freedom. People think revenge is about fire, about destruction, but the deepest revenge, the one that hits the hardest, is living well, quietly, fully, without them. The other day, I passed by the old street, Gardenia Drive. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, just glanced at it in the rearview mirror and smiled. That version of me, the one who begged for respect, who whispered to avoid conflict, who watched strangers drink juice in her kitchen and said nothing, she's gone, buried in drywall and court files and silence. And in her place is me, Monica Wells, homeowner, writer, woman of quiet strength, keeper of her own damn keys. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that no one, absolutely no one, gets to rent out my worth. Not again. Not ever.